kinda funny how much stuff gets overlooked these days. Hello everybody, it is me, Sci-Fi, and today I decided to take a look over the arsenal and my various upgrades and thought to myself, what if I did a top 10 video, but put my own spin on it? So with the twirl of my top hat and a few hours of contemplation later, here I am, with my top 10 favorite upgrades. Now what do I mean by upgrades? Because that could be incredibly vague. Well, any mod, arcane, or archon shard, or bonus from the shard. Basically anything to be equipped to a warframe, weapon, companion, you get the idea. But because of this, there could be many upgrades that just don't make the cut on this list. But I do feel should be mentioned due to how cool these are. So before we move on to my actual top 10, let me drag you over and take a look at a few honorable mentions. The purple Archon shard is one of my favorites for quite a few reasons. Some obvious, like the critical damage bonus the shard grants, with it doubling with over 500 energy in your pool, and the shard granting a miniature equilibrium effect. But my love for this shard largely comes from its electricity damage bonus. 30% modded electricity damage, 45% on Tau, with a higher bonus per Crimson, Azure, or Purple shard, is pretty strong depending on the weapon you equip. And what makes it most interesting is how it's modded to behave like a progenitor bonus, but if you equip a single elemental mod on elemental weapons like the Trumpet Prime, the mod will prioritize the base element instead of the shard, allowing easy modding for elemental combos like Electric Blast and Gas. It's very niche, but very formidable on the right weapons. And then we have Magus Overload. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of amazed this arcane isn't more popular. Until I remember you have to go through Little Deck to get it, and respect people's decision to ignore it. Jokes aside, this arcane is very underrated to me, for a more DPS focused operator setup. What it does is pretty simple. Upon void slinging through a robotic enemy, the operator stuns that enemy, and after 3 seconds, discharges an electricity explosion equal to 80% of the slinged target's max HP within a 25 meter radius. What makes this arcane so devastating in my eyes is due to how many enemies fit the robotic category. Obviously the Corpus Moas fit this build, but the Necromechs in the Entrani Labs fit this build too. There's more in the Void as well. And despite the Infested faction not having any of these enemy types, they can come around if it's a Void Fisher mission. And this isn't one of these arcanes that only works at max rank either. I mean, here's me here with a rank 1 version of this arcane. Yeah, this thing is really funny. Really conditional, but is an absolute treat to enjoy when it does work. Lastly, we have Anabolic Pollination preset mod for the Pharaoh Predecite Companion. The augment is pretty simple. The Pharaoh leaves behind toxin spores lasting for 10 seconds, that when walked through grants those who traverse through them 100% toxin damage for 15 seconds. The buff itself isn't particularly special, but I like it for the simple fact that the operator can grab it and do some pretty decent damage when used alongside Unairu. Now, with those 3 out of the way, let's begin this ranking. For realsies, will I have something you like? Something that shocks you? Who knows? That's the beauty of these sort of things. Secondary Nerve Hit was an arcane that I honestly was not expecting to love as much as I do. Taking a look at the arcane, it honestly looked kinda, well, appalling. On hit, gained 10% critical chance, resetting after hitting 6 big critical hits, aka orange crits. Most critical buffs are what are called additive bonuses, meaning if you had a base crit of 20%, 10% of 20 is 2. So when I initially read this, I thought, well,
it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Because this would take forever to ramp up on lower tier crit weapons, and on weapons that already hit 100% critical chance with mods, would more than likely hit orange crits already, especially with multi-shot. Until I slapped this little bugger on the Akicore without any crit mods. The 10% crit is actually a flat critical number, akin to Harrow's Covenant buff, meaning on weapons with high fire rate, multi-shot, and low base crit, can use this as a replacement for the critical mods needed for them to do it previously. One mainstream example being the Kuban Nukor, with its pitiful 7% crit chance, but insane 5 times multiplier, to the most unexpected power shifts with getting the stug of all weapons becoming usable. Well, borderline usable. It's a very good upgrade that on the right weapons acts as a replacement for crit mods, but is only good if you constantly use said weapon. Now I know this one seems kinda stupid given red shards are all the rave these days, but trust me when I say that I would rather have 1 Tau yellow shard over 5 Tau reds on any frame. The yellow Archon shard was a shard that I admittedly did not understand the hype since I was brainwashed by the meta at that time. But after I started properly build crafting, the potential of this shard truly made itself known. The extra HP and energy on pickups are decent, but the 25% casting speed and 15% parkour velocity are the true winners of this shard, seeing as all frames, especially Limbo, love casting speed. And parkour velocity as a mechanic makes Warframe faster and smoother, so it being boosted just improves the gameplay further, and max casting speed Limbo never gets old. So, from personal testing, I could say that this thing goes toe-to-toe with the Acolyte Arcanes, which is honestly impressive. But that's not the primary crux to why I enjoy Primary Crux. Crux is one of those arcanes that finds most use on weapons with lower magazines and or lower status chance, to help improve their performance through 60% ammo efficiency and 300% modded status chance at max rank and 10 weak point hits. Especially on battery-operated weapons like the Basmu, where the magazine can sometimes run out before you can even kill a single enemy at some levels. But with this, consistent ammo efficiency and more status chance than one knows what to do with is achieved simply by hitting headshots. And the fact it funnels you into a different playstyle of aiming and caring about precision, something you sadly don't see in Warframe very often. Do you like to suck? Do you want to suck even harder and not have to be a detriment to yourself? Well, not sure what can help you, but Melee Vortex certainly did it for me. Melee Vortex tends to get overshadowed quickly by Melee Influence. I mean, Influence procs on status while Vortex procs on kill, but despite that, I always found Vortex more enjoyable to use by comparison. This due in large part to how grouping tools work in general to aid in mobility and DPS. Let me explain. Vortex and Influence are both ranged melee options that do two vastly different things. Influence spreads electricity status and other status effects on the weapon to enemies nearby, while Vortex pulls enemies to those killed, while a magnetic status is on them. On the surface, Influence seems to be the better of the two, but people forget that Influence, which typically kills, ends with no new enemies being nearby, so now I gotta run to another one, while Vortex brings said enemies to you. It has chances of dragging in even more enemies on kill, allowing for a more campy playstyle, so long as you are lucky and have a strong enough melee. For your melee doesn't even need to have magnetic modded onto them to work, allowing the use of a primer, unlike Influence which does. And one last thing, use Melee Vortex on the Dual Core. You will thank me later. Okay, I know it's another arcane again. What can I say, I love them. Especially this one for similar reasons as Vortex. Magus Anomaly is that one arcane that I never remove from my operator due to the level of utility it grants in combat, for it forgoes the concept of subsuming a grouping tool, and instead turns you into the grouping tool. Why waste materials on a subsume or a companion slot for Nautilus, when you can do the same with that person who phases in and out of existence at will, while having access to the various operator trees in the process? And with it being 30 meters, you're not really sacrificing too much having it in your back pocket. I mean, come on. None of you should be surprised this mod was going to appear somewhere on this list. Rift Torrent is one of my favorites for many reasons, but I'm going to only go over two of them that I feel are most important. The first being how the augment functions in Limbo's gameplay loop. This augment gives 30% base damage, scaling with strength, per enemy that is affected by Rift Surge, meaning the augment will fluctuate in terms of damage based on the amount of rifted enemies you have. And since enemies are rifted, they are affected by stasis, your main crowd control method, making this augment one that rewards you for using Limbo's kit. The more enemies you crowd control, the more damage you deal in return. But more important, it is a base damage buff, rather than a multiplicative one, allowing us to drop base damage buffs like the primary Deadhead Arcane, and allows weapons with multi-CO to have diabolical damage in comparison to other weapon buffs. That isn't to say I don't have some base damage in my build somewhere, because I won't always be in the Rift, and it's only active while within it. But if you decide to pick up Limbo, this augment is a must-have. I know this one is cheating, kind of, but I can't really talk about the set bonus with just one mod, so all 4 mods are here. The Mecha Set bonus is hilariously strong for its bonus, being enemies marked by the companion will unleash all status effects to those within 30 meters on death. So basically Contagious Bond, but funnier, allowing me to offload the nuking capabilities of my companion rather than running frames like Saren to do so. But again, it is an optional upgrade, but when it works, it gives such a good hit of dopamine, unlike most other nukes. Not much to say, it's strong, conditional, and feels rewarding when I find that target in the sea of fodder. I doubt any of you knew this arcane existed. But trust me when I say I have never had more fun with one arcane than this one. Arcane Eruption is a very simple one. On Energy Orb collection, unleash a knockdown wave to enemies nearby. That sounds kinda neat. What is it, 5 meters 10 or... I keep on bringing up this mod, and I'm still sad more people don't know this thing exists. Rapid Resilience is a mod that is very simple on the surface, reducing all status effects affected to yourself by 75%. But I don't think it's clicked for people how much that entails. Cold procs get reduced duration, slash status does almost nothing in Archon hunts, those toxin procs won't finish you off if the direct damage hasn't done that already. But its most notable use case is against heat. Heat procs can cause several issues for shield gate builds, because the user has to constantly cast abilities to deal with the tick damage, 5 casts at least. With this mod, the heat procs dissipate so fast that they run out before your shield gate will. Unless I was running a frame with Status Immunity, I will always have this mod equipped. I know this arcane has only been out for a few weeks as of this recording, but within that time, this arcane has managed to make its way into my heart as one of the best and fun arcanes to utilize. Arcane Escapist is what happens when you take Nidus' passive, make his stacks built on Parazon finishers, and make the invincibility period last 12 seconds instead of 5. And don't be deceived by that trigger on finisher point. Because once in combat, and you become aware of how many enemies can be finishered, like I have, it becomes incredibly easy to not only seek out, but maintain 3 of these charges. Do they always get used? No, but it's excellent to have in your back pocket for when those times come. Honestly, I would consider this a direct side grade to something like Last Gasp because of its ease of use, but remaining perfectly balanced due to the conditions and the fact it takes up an arcane slot. Especially in Limbo's case, since the operator cannot hit enemies within the rift. But yeah, those are my favorite upgrades so far. A couple meta picks because even I enjoy a few, but ultimately for me it boils down to what is the most engaging to me, or what forces me to mod differently, especially in me deciding if Influence or Vortex are going to be in those spots they are. But after weighing the utilities and synergies of both, I decided Vortex because it fits into my playstyle. A playstyle that I feel is too niche for people to use or want to experiment with in the first place. Mainly due to the domination of melee influence, as demonstrated by my buddy, Well Played Ninjas. Oh yeah! We're talking about this whole can of worms for a little bit. As you may know, my buddy Well Played Ninjas released a video known as "The AoE Situation is Crazy." And yes, I know he apologized about the whole situation with it, but I still feel obligated to give a take or analysis on it from my POV. For I feel there was right and wrong on both sides of this situation, because I do believe melee influence has some massive issues in regards to balance. Not in regards to damage, but in regards to its trigger conditions. Melee influence is a 20-meter AoE for melees, with 0 line of sight checks on it, that can be triggered on a simple electric status, a massive damage AoE for nearly 0 investment, with its closest competitor Vortex requiring a kill that isn't even guaranteed to happen, with the other arcanes not even being worth talking about due to them being too niche, or their gimmicks aren't strong enough to warrant their use. And this is where we come to where I think the general players are wrong about influence. Buffing the other arcanes will not solve a thing, because of how influence functions at a fundamental level. I mean, take a look at melee exposure. 240% corrosive damage on enough melee strikes after casting an ability lasting 25 seconds. Something that is almost purely single target with a relatively easy condition to trigger. But no amount of damage they give this thing, not even 5,000% raw corrosive damage, would get someone to use this, because of how easy influence is to trigger and how much AoE it is capable of. Which comes to where I feel Ninjas was wrong in his arguments for nerfing it. No matter how many changes to its AoE size, damage scaling, or time it lasts will stop people from using it. This due in large part to the previous reasons, but also due to the fundamental fact that it is an AoE damage method, while leaving the other arcanes to rot. If there is one thing I have learned in life, it's that more than one thing can be right. Yes, the arcanes need a buff. Not on par with influence, since that sets a precedent of to just buff something to fix it, when at times it's just a bad design for the health of the game and the players themselves. But, yes, influence also needs a nerf, not in its damage, but in its trigger conditions. Here is my proposal. Give the arcanes struggling to keep up some higher numbers for their values, but grant extra mechanics or effects on top, say force proccing a particular status, or a disarm effect, something to give it an identity that isn't just make number go up. Second, change influence's trigger from a status to on kill like Vortex. This will allow it to be as effective as before, while pulling it back in line with the other arcanes, because there is absolutely 0 reason it should be as easy to use while being as powerful as it is, unless you intend to remove any and all sense of delayed gratification from the game. Something that I struggle to maintain in the modding system Warframe has, for yes, I could choose not to use these melee options that rot my gray matter from the inside out, but one person not using it will not make a difference in the grand scheme of things. You can ignore the meta, but the meta will never ignore you. That doesn't mean that one should not try. So, that is why, today, I am placing all of my current projects on hold, and intend to divert all of my video making time to making a Florida Man's Guide to Warframe modding. An undertaking intended to help people see the game in a new light, and hopefully gets people to experiment more. A creation not intended to hold your hand, but to open your arms with joy and awe at the possibilities, and give you a better understanding of how I see Warframe and why I make the modding choices that I do. Because frankly, I'm tired of some of the annoying brain rot I see these days, and want to stick to some of the idiots I see online, while providing knowledge that will teach you how to think, instead of taking orders from the guy farming you for views, in the hopes that I can learn something from you all myself. For what is life worth living for, if there is nothing to take in from it, even a silly video game? And with that, it is time for me to disappear for who knows how long. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to leave me a like and comment letting me know your thoughts. If you want to keep up with me or want to chill, come join our Discord. If you want to support me in the future or want some behind the scenes on my videos, feel free to check out my Patreon as well. And with that, I will see you all later. Have a wonderful day.